12 years ago, I was still fresh from my move to Los Angeles when I started a fashion and lifestyle blog featuring mostly menswear, surfing, and really just life in Southern California. One day while strolling down Abbot Kinney and Venice Beach, I came across a row of about 5 bikes on the sidewalk, each hosting the name Linus across the top tube in a timeless sans serif font. But these weren't just any bikes. They weren't mountain bikes, nor were they road bikes requiring a kit of spandex. Interestingly enough, they weren't beach cruisers either. They were, and still are, simple, really well-designed city bikes. Predating the commuter craze of the last decade, Linus bikes were often sold as single-speed bikes with swoop-backed handlebars, which made the riding position more upright and comfortable, and they came in colors far more interesting than just black or white. To this day, I get complimented on mine, which I soon purchased after featuring Linus on my blog. When I would feature brands, I'd email a link to the post to those companies, so my first interaction with Linus's founder, Adam McDermot, actually took place over email in 2011. Funny enough, he and I'd never met until this interview. Adam was born in South Africa, though much of his childhood was spent in Malibu as apartheid provoked his mother to move them to California. Adam started Linus through motivations predicated on lifestyle changes and environmental impact, something certainly resonating even more so today. I stand by the notion that Linus makes the most comfortable bikes on the planet and also serve as an incredible value add given their price point, so I was excited to sit down with Adam. What I love most is this is really a story of someone wanting something that they couldn't find and they decided to just figure out how to get it done. I think a ton of entrepreneurs can absolutely identify with this mentality, with the motivation to keep pushing until the mission is complete. Today, Linus is carried in over 200 stores worldwide and is bolstered by quite a large assortment of bikes and accessories. This past Christmas, I actually bought my wife a Linus, which has been instrumental during this time of COVID-19, as we've been exploring much of San Diego as a way to switch up our exercise regimen. I guess I can't say enough about the bikes, really, so I'll leave it to Adam to share even more. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Well, Adam, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me.
Where are you from originally?
Originally born in South Africa.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I was there until I was 5, and then we came to the States. We moved to LA.
Oh, wow. That's a drastic culture shock, I'd imagine.
I mean, for a 5-year-old, there's really no culture, so, but it was just like, now there's summer is winter and winter is summer, or, it's like, it was. But
were you from Cape Town? Or?
I was originally in Johannesburg.
Oh, Johannesburg, sure.
Yeah. My mother and I came here, as I said, when I was 5. And California, I guess in a lot of ways, is similar to South Africa. It's outdoorsy. It's like the weather. It's climate. It's also kind of like a sprawling city, Johannesburg.
Okay.
Kind of like LA, like, there's people live in houses. It's a lot of yards and that kind of life. So, we had some friends here and we came to LA, and then eventually we moved to Malibu.
Oh, wow.
After a couple years, and grew up like kind of at the end of Malibu, northern Malibu, like by Zuma, Trancas. I don't know if you know the area very well, but it's in a way it's almost country, compared to Los Angeles. It's there's a lot of space between people, or there's no real neighborhoods, things like that. So that was my early childhood, and then actually when I was 16, I went back to South Africa. I finished high school there in Cape Town. That was kind of right at independence. So Mandela was released from prison, and then shortly after they had elections. And
was apartheid any reason why you came to LA?
Again, I was 5, so totally unconscious.
But for your mom?
But for my mother, yes. Yeah. South Africa, so it was apartheid, and it was totally cut off from the world. There were sanctions. There was just access to like ideas, music, film, anything was really cut off because it was so remote. And then because of sanctions, it was a really isolated place. She had friends in the States, and it was an opportunity for her to leave and
Cool.
come here. So
yeah, Nice. So what, well, you finished high school there. So like, what were you into as a kid and even in Cape Town, would say, when you went back? What were like the activities you were enjoying?
So, that was like sort of the, I guess, peak teen angst, So like growing up in Malibu, clearly it was like surfing and playing in drainage ditches and, what kids do you find stuff.
What kind of music were you into?
So by the time I had left, it was kind of that. It was like NWA and Too Short, and it was like that was kind of a fascination for
Gangster
especially
rap.
for kids who grow up like removed from the city. You have this fascination with the city because it's like right there. It's Los Angeles, and then all this kind of music and energy was coming out of it. So I was like just fascinated by it.
Sure.
It was actually kind of at that age where I was like starting to reject surf culture more, and I was like, I want to be a gangster.
Interesting.
I was just like,
anything that's anti-Malibu.
Yeah, it was just like, it was cool. It was interesting to me. It was like, there was like, so Malibu then also, Malibu was also an interesting place. I don't know if you spent much time there. So there's sort of like celebrity Malibu and people that are connected to the entertainment industry. And then there's a lot of like old families who are from Malibu who were like hippies or were kind of, I guess, more working class families that were in construction or lifeguards, firemen. So it's these two worlds that sometimes connect and sometimes very often are separate.
Yeah.
But there's a part of like Malibu, especially in surf culture back then, where it's like you only wear like a black wetsuit, you don't put any colors on your surfboard, you have very sort of like specific ideas about like what's progressive or what's not in terms of surfing. Like it was always like it was kind of a rejection of like anything that's like competitive or like
right.
If you're into like surfing in contests or surfing in sort of this more like progressive style. So it was like there was a lot of like localism. That was me, like in 15, yeah. I guess. And then around that time, my mom decided to move back. For a kid who's like, you lived in the States and then going back to like a place like South Africa was really interesting. It was like going from like a school with like 3,000 kids to a school of like 400 kids. Wearing a uniform, but in ways like it was more rigid, and like especially like how school is, but at the same time because it was like smaller, looser, like you were a lot more free. Like school in the States, for lunch, like you would just go off and you go, leave the campus and maybe you don't come back, or like there was like it was really like up to you what you're gonna put into it. There, like they were like on you. It was a much more demanding academic requirement there. But other than that, it was also the drinking age was 18 and it wasn't enforced, so we were like 16 and we were going to bars. Or weirdly, like you could like hitchhike there, because you couldn't drive. You couldn't drive until you're 18 there. They had it kind of flipped. So.
Right.
So we'd go out and then I'd hitchhike home like at night. And it was just like, it was really fun. It's like, it was a kind of a cool experience. And like I had an accent. So like, people were interested in me. Girls were interested in me because,
right.
I was like the American kid.
American kid. Yeah.
I had CDs.
Right. Yeah. What did your mom do for work?
She was a housewife, while we were in the States. And then, eventually she started working in production. She was a stylist and a makeup artist.
Nice. So after high school, what did you do? Did you go to university?
I went to film school.
Okay, where'd you go?
I went to Emerson College in Boston.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boston's a great time.
Yeah, it was great for me. Like I've never lived on like in an East Coast city, and it's an old city, and it's such a different America compared to like Southern California.
Oh yeah. Very.
And it's also like right in the city. It's not like on a campus that's removed from the city experience. So yeah, I really liked it. I loved Boston.
So what drew you to film school? Were you looking to direct or write or both?
I didn't really know. I was like in South Africa. I mean, There was always like kind of like film conversation in my house. Like my stepfather like loved movies. And we like just, you know, as like a family, we would see movies and then like discuss it after. And we were always like kind of watching interesting movies. And then when I was in South Africa, my mom dated a guy who made music for commercials. So a lot of his friends and buddies were like in the South African film industry. And when I was like finishing high school there and just looking for work, I got like some, you know, just like driving trucks and PA work and things like that, or charging walkie-talkies and
yeah, exactly.
But I liked, I didn't really know. I liked the people. I liked the environment. It's kind of like a sort of like a band of misfits, and but they're doing kind of interesting work. It's like there's a lot of sort of at stake. It's a big production of people and equipment and budgets, but yet they're all like kind of like clowns at the same time. So it wasn't like really a conversation about like, what do you want to do when you grow up? It was just
right.
Like, I got into that school and I got like a scholarship, so I was like, oh, I'll give it a try, and I took it from there. And then I ended up working in the film industry for 10 years. I became a camera assistant, the first AC, which is like a focus puller. That was like in the day when it was actual film, celluloid film, not digital, and it was great. It was great for the time I was there, and I met like some really amazing people and traveled, and it's definitely it's a grueling work.
It's grind, yeah.
Yeah, it's grueling because you're only making money when you're on set, and was pretty much a 12-hour day. You never know like what your year is going to be, if it's going to be like how much work you're going to get, what you're going to make. It's really hard to plan.
Yeah, you kind of become familiar with the unemployment scene.
Yeah.
I know like a lot of my friends here in LA that still work in the industry, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It's like 3 to 6 months a year they're on unemployment, and they get hired back. And
no, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean it's weird, and you go through like all the highs and lows of it, like either you're working too much and that's like kind of destroying you, or you're not working enough and that's like destroying you, so.
Different type of pressure.
Yeah, there's like sort of like emotional highs and lows. And then now like having a company, even though it's like my own company, like I'm still kind of like locked into like company hours. So it was like,
sure,
it's a different experience.
Yeah. So did you start Linus right after 10 years of working in the business?
It was a little simultaneous. So it was like 10 years of working in the industry, and kind of like towards the end of that time, started just realize that like it's not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It feels really impermanent. Like you work a job, you put a ton of energy into it, and then at the end of it, there's like, sometimes there's a movie. If you work on movies, I was working mostly in commercials, so it's like, it's something that truly doesn't exist.
Was there any commercial that stands out in memory?
I mean, there was like, it's very often like the better job is not necessarily the content of what you're making, but like
the paycheck.
The paycheck, or the location, or the people that you're with.
Sure.
I got to work. I got to work with like some of them who are still my best friends. So that was like the biggest thing from like that experience, is the people that I've remained close to.
So what was kind of did you work anywhere else? You said it was kind of simultaneous, that Linus.
Oh, so yeah, so sort of towards the end of my like work in film, I had the idea for Linus. It was like a loose idea originally, and
what was that like?
At that time, I mean, there was kind of a lot of things happening. It was like sort of the end of the Bush administration. It was like the Gulf War. It was Iraq. It was like sort of the emergence of like climate science, and like kind of what's really happening to our environment. And then it was the recession, so it was like all those kind of things. And I just like, I just felt like we can't personally, I couldn't like kind of continue in the same capacity as I was, like, which a lot of it was like making commercials, like trying to like generate desire for things that probably people didn't really need most of the time. And wanting to make something that I just like, that was just tangible, you know, like I like a bike exists, you know, and I was getting kind of burnt out on just like putting all this energy into making a commercial and not even like seeing it because I didn't care. And I was more there for like the process of the work and the people that I was working with and the actual result of the work. So it was that, and then just like believing that, listen, I never thought that like bicycles would replace cars in any capacity. Like, cars would always clearly be part of transportation, but I felt that there was a space for bicycles as cities became denser, and that has been the tendency over the last 20, 30 years that people like went to the suburbs and now they're moving back. You know, they're urbanizing and it's getting more and more dense in our cities. And so within like a crowded city, like short trips, you know, under 2 miles are in many ways more practical and more pleasant to do by bike. And it's not about being an athlete or like a sort of anti-establishment like bike messenger. It was just like, this makes sense for short trips in an urban setting, you know, where you can...
And it's faster than walking.
It's faster than walking. It's more enjoyable than walking. You can carry more of a load. You can actually kind of do like kind of basic, you know, errands, whether it's like groceries or picking up a kid. There's always a parking for you within that sort of environment. As crowded as like these cities are, it's probably the same amount of time. It's better for you, like physically. It's better for the environment. It just makes perfect sense for me. And some of my favorite cities are cities that are sort of bicycle centric. You know, when you're going Copenhagen, or Amsterdam. I love. You know, like there's most like European cities were kind of
more bikes than people.
Yeah, because I don't know how it necessarily happened. Maybe because their cities have always been really dense. Their roads are narrow and small, and parking sucks, and it's expensive to own a car in Europe. And yeah, once like you get used to it, it's kind of a better way to live, right?
Sure.
But I just felt like there wasn't a bike that really like fit that model in the U.S. It was always like they were designing bikes for other like boardwalk recreation, you know, like a big heavy beach cruiser.
Or a mountain bike
that's like very specific purpose, or a road bike that's, whether it's uncomfortable or it's just like too expensive to like, you know, use on a daily basis and park, or, you know, threat of like damage or theft or something like that. So I just wanted to make like a very simple, functional, elegant bike that could serve like as a model in the US to try and like build this idea of bikes as transportation. So that was like really what Linus started as.
So where did the name come from?
The name, so a very close friend of mine's, when I was starting the company, he had a kid and his name was Linus. Oh, cool. So, I mean, which was like partly that relationship, but also just like, I like that name. There's a lot of like, you know, when you're naming a company, it's like, is there a trademark for it already?
Right, sure. Is it registered?
Does it fit on the head badge? Is it, you know, those kind of things as well.
Well, I also think of things like font. You know, like, will it look cool when you write it out? And you know, and it's actually familiar with Charlie Brown. And then you get that whole connection.
It has like this thing where it's like that familiarity. So it feels like, oh, has this been around for like a really long time? It also has like kind of like an old European kind of thing to it. There's something in like just the word line, you know, it feels like kind of like travel in a sense. The more you kind of think about it, the more like it starts to feel right. I guess, I don't know if whenever you arrive on a name. It just becomes more dynamic. Yeah. Even like, I think like Linus, I think its origin is like it's flax, you know, which like flax is what they made linens from, and linens became sails. So like transportation from like the very beginning of time essentially like was kind of in a way connected to its name, and it's like from many little things like little tiny flax seeds, you get like something that as big as like culture or transportation or.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was just like a lot of like kind of connections that felt right, and yeah.
Can you touch on the design a little bit for those that don't know what the aesthetic is of these bikes?
Yeah. So I guess the basis, like at least when we started the company, the frames, they're based on sort of traditional kind of classic European city bikes, Italian and French and Scandinavian bikes. If you've ever ridden those bikes, they tend to be quite heavy though.
Yes.
And they also have a really long wheelbase and kind of a stretched out front end. So the experience of riding them, it's very steady, but it kind of drives like a tank.
Right.
It's very stable. So we like the sort of lines of that bike, the sort of profiles, but we just wanted to make them more agile and a bit kind of more fun to ride. So that was kind of the origin. Working with steel, it kind of made the most sense for city bikes. Mounts for carrying cargo, that kind of thing. More of an upright position, so there's less weight in your shoulders and neck and wrists. Just like a very sort of practical, kind of bulletproof bike.
So by making the handlebars swoop back, that inherently makes you more upright.
Yeah, it brings you back. Yeah. So that's like the origin of the company. Those are, frankly, like I think what we're known for is like those really classic bikes. We kind of expanded on that over the last 12 years. We're still within this sort of realm of transportation, city bike.
So when did the company start? Was it 2008?
Launched 2007. That was like the very first bikes that we brought over. I was really originally manufacturing in Vietnam.
And where are they made now?
And now we're manufacturing in Taiwan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is it like a minimum order quantity deal, or is it?
It's complex. There's a lot of reasons. Yeah, I'll get into that in a second. I guess right now, what I wanted to say is that we have like this more heritage line, and now we have like a more, I guess, aggressive commuter line of bikes for just traveling further distances, a lighter, more agile, more speeds. So those are like the sort of with alloy frames. We have electric bikes coming out in the sort of late summer as well.
Cool.
So, but everything that we do is in this world of of really functional transportation and what we believe to be like really sort of elegant lines,
So initially, how did you start the company? Was it just you? Did you have partners? Like, was it savings? Did you friends and family help you along, or how did that go?
So first the idea, right? And then like just looking, and it's like, does it exist? Is it like, just kind of figure out if it exists in the world, and at least in the US, and I can't find it for myself and I want it, so let's take the next step. And I came from a totally different environment,
Sure.
Working in film, and it's so like specific. Like I work with cameras, that's what I did, it's such a specific field of, I like the sort of like nostalgic kind of quality of these bikes, and the sort of, and that's, in my thinking, I was like, okay, like Vietnam seemed like a place that was like kind of trapped a little bit in like a communist kind of time bubble, kind of like Cuba in a way.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
That was so I wanted to go there, and I'd seen like just kind of in my research of the place that there was a lot of like, because it was a French colony at one point. So a lot of like their traditional French bikes kind of became like the Vietnamese bike.
Right.
So that was my first kind of angle, kind of going to a source like that. And so I was on a surf trip in Indonesia, and I was with some friends, and they were all like, the trip was over. We went back to Singapore to like fly home, and I was like, I'm gonna go to Vietnam. I had located a factory just like in my research, and I just went to visit them, and I found like a translator, and they had a conversation with me. No one ever said no, and so it was just like, and I didn't know I didn't grasp like how everything that's involved in like manufacturing a product, a mechanical product, boxing it, shipping it, bringing it in, building it, selling, like I was just like, this is something I want.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't like kind of think it out thoroughly. So, which I didn't get overwhelmed, at that point. I was like, oh, I found a source. Great. Let's take the next step. And then, so, I had like a small savings. I brought over like 100 bikes. I did like a bit of like just sort of very basic design work, working off some of their existing frames and kind of and speccing them a little differently.
So they were doing everything soup to nuts, like the stems, the pedals,
a lot of
wheels.
it. A lot of it was, yeah. And I think there were some local vendors that were, and they were really beautiful.
Yeah.
They didn't like. There was a lot of inconsistencies. It wasn't like modern manufacturing sort of standard ISO standard, and so there was like a lot of difficulties. Communication was really difficult. There was no like banking system. I had to like Western Union them like money. They couldn't order parts from other countries, so I would have to like fly to Taiwan, pick up hubs, and like hand carry them over and get through customs with like 80 hubs, and it was just like, it was silly. And I didn't know the difference because I had never really worked in manufacturing. I thought, okay,
that's crazy.
That there's got to be an easier way. So, so anyways, I brought them over. I had like a public storage with 100 bikes in it, and
you were putting them together.
And then that was like my first like kind of like panic attack. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna do this. It was just like, this was like a mountain, like a filled like storage unit,
just boxes,
like floor to ceiling, just solid boxes. And then I didn't, it was like a little bit of word of mouth. I managed to find a space in Venice, like a sort of a temporary space. A business was moving out, and I just set up shop there. And I had like some friends helping me to build, and I was building in the back of like my apartment had like a little courtyard in the back, like in Venice, like a tiny space. And I probably sold through those bikes in 3 weekends.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were you doing to market it, or like, were you just putting them out on a sidewalk?
Yeah, I was putting them on the street, basically.
That's sick.
Like and it was on Audemars, so it was like the most kind of walked street in Venice, and the sort of, I guess, the center of Venice.
Oh, so that was the original space.
It wasn't the original space, but it was on the same street. Yeah, and I had a lot of friends who worked in like Venice was a little smaller then. There was just like one bar.
Predates that GQ article that said
it was
number one shopping street in the world.
It was before GQ. It was before Gelina, which also like transformed the street. There was one bar, and a lot of my friends worked there, so like they were also kind of just connected to the community, and it just kind of spread really quickly. Yeah. And but also people were like, it was like back then it was really like you can get a beach cruiser, or you can just get like an old beater, and there was nothing that like was just really simple that looked really cool like this.
And it's not $1,200.
Yeah, and it just kind of hit the mark of what people kind of wanted.
How did you set up pricing? Because I think they were right around $400, right? $350, something.
So in the beginning, it was like, yeah, they were really cheap.
So was that just like let me double my cost, or was it like standard retail type markup?
I didn't know what standard retail was. I didn't know what like wholesale markups were. I didn't know what like the sort of industry standard was.
Yeah.
It was just like, let me double my costs. I didn't even know what all my costs were really, because I probably wasn't factoring in a lot of things. But it was at a price that I guess that they moved quickly, which was like,
do I need to increase my prices?
Do I need to increase my prices? And also, primarily, you need to increase my prices, but also kind of like it got me through that first production and all the assembly of those 100 bikes, and realizing like the limitations of my manufacturer. And so that eventually, like that experience, it proved that there was an interest, there was a demand in this product, but I had to like sort out manufacturing and all like the sort of the business of it.
Yeah.
So back to Asia again, found a new manufacturer, ended up moving production to China at that time. with like a very reputable factory. I'd been producing for the U.S. for like 30 years. I had like an agent who was there who knew the industry as well, who helped me with sourcing, and so like it changed everything.
Yep.
Vastly improved the product. And
so these are all still steel chromoly bikes?
Steel bikes, yeah. Yeah, and this is still, at this point, it was still like I was still working production on the side because, you can kind of bounce back and forth. It was kind of getting to the point where it was hard to do both, but I still, at least in the sort of development phase, I could, and thankfully had like the film industry to go back to, because it's the kind of work where you can fit something in between. You can have like a side gig.
Sure.
So I got through the new manufacturer, samples, and at that point, my existing partner to this day came into the company. He's a friend of mine from South Africa, and we also worked in production together.
Cool.
And so we became partners. We brought in like that next load of bikes, another 100 bikes, and those also sold really well. We set up another shop. And it was from that point that it was like the first summer of the bikes being available at retail. They had a higher price at this point. They were more expensive cost-wise as well. That someone who was just walking on the street from New York came into our shop, who was in the bike industry. He'd worked like more retail his whole life, but he kind of knew the business somewhat, and he was a young guy. He was younger than us, and he was like, "These are great. Like, this should be selling in New York." And he's like, "Let me be your rep," And it was like we were like happy with the success of our retail space, that the bikes were moving. We weren't quite prepared for like, okay, let's move into wholesale.
Right.
But like that was like encouraging, and then we were like, well, let's see like what does that mean, and then. There was a trade show literally like 2 weeks later.
Are you a watch collector but having trouble finding something cool and unique? I mean, the last thing you really want is what everyone else has, right? Well, this is where my friend and former Standard H podcast guest Tim Jackson comes in. He and his wife Jana own Passion Fine Jewelry in Solana Beach, California, where you'll find an incredible assortment of independent watches waiting for you in their shop and online. And if you're getting engaged, have an anniversary coming up, or simply have another reason to buy jewelry, they have you covered. Passion Fine Jewelry also employs a goldsmith on staff for any custom desires, so you're able to go that route if you so choose. Visit Passion Fine Jewelry when you find yourself in Southern California, but they're also open 24 hours a day at passionfinejewelry.com. You can also find a wealth of information through Tim's blog, independentintime.com, where he covers anything independent watchmaking related, among a plethora of other information, so check that out as well. I've really enjoyed creating these podcasts on behalf of Standard H and sharing each of these personal stories with all of you. We each have goals, and it's the entrepreneurial spirit that inspired me to start the company. You can further support the brand and the podcast by visiting standard-h.com to pick up your choice of merchandise, and as always, thank you for listening. Lastly, if you have a moment, please rate and review the show. It makes a tremendous difference in keeping these things going. And now back to my conversation with Adam. What show did you go to?
That was Interbike.
Interbike, yeah.
So Interbike, which doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
The industry.
It's Vegas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we managed to get like a booth at Interbike. It was also, so I don't know if you've done much trade shows, and I don't know how trade shows work in other industries as well, but like in the bike industry at that time, they had like sort of the main room, which was like all the established brands. And then they had like another room, which was like the new brands, and things got kind of wacky in the new room. Like that's where you had like weird, like elliptical bikes that you kind of like walk
right
on water, or like anything like new and different, and kind of like, so it can be like Siberia, like to end up in that room. And fortunately we managed to get and we didn't know, we just kind of by luck got a booth, like actually in a really kind of good spot, like on one of the avenues in the main room next to like some really big brands, and a lot of people saw our product, and we picked up a lot of business cards. right? There was like a lot of like interest. Closing a deal at a trade show was like another thing, but we actually, we got like some hot leads. And in our naivety in the beginning, we were like, it's a 20 bike minimum. Like we just like don't know where we came up with that number. It sounded good.
Yeah.
Everyone like ran away from that number, So we eventually compromised on our minimum, and we opened.
What is that minimum now?
The industry has changed a lot, So a lot of the as a wholesaler, it's more on you to hold inventory than it was in the past. Before, like the dealer would like stock inventory quite deeply. They would be their own warehousing, but now as a wholesaler, they're like, we only want a special order, or we don't want to carry a lot of depth. They don't want to carry a lot of debt. So in that kind of model, the sale happens at the store, but they're calling it in, and you ship them a bike, they make the sale. So it's a little different. The minimums are much less than they used to be for us. Sure. But anyway, so from that trade show, we picked up an account in New York. We picked up an account, I think, in Portland. I think there was one in San Francisco, and that was it. But it was a start,
Yeah. Well, and those are like hot corners, right?
Yeah. That's where we sell. Those are like we're like kind of an urban product. We still had our own warehousing kind of at that point, which was like a warehouse like in South Central that was like shared with like a food truck.
Oh,
kind
no
of
way.
Like a food truck supplier, so they had like all like the like sitting in the ice.
So the bikes were refrigerated.
So we made a chain link fence like within this space, and that's where we had like a pickup truck, and we'd run down there, grab some bikes, build them, and it was like this kind of very like manual, like really the worst planning. At that trade show, we met someone in 3PL, and that also transformed us, like moving like all that sort of operational stuff to a fulfillment service like that. Like,
now, is that now like in Ontario or somewhere?
Right now, yeah, we have one in California and one in New Jersey. And that was also really transformative, like having the two warehouses, because a lot of our business is on the East Coast. You have to like be able to offer shipping that
is reasonable.
The cost of shipping a bike across country is one thing, and also just time.
Yeah,
they want to.
It's like a restaurant, right?
Yeah, they want product by the weekend or something.
The ingredients need to be fresh.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
So that was a huge for us. We definitely couldn't have managed with our own warehouse at that time.
A quick question on the design I meant to ask you earlier. Yeah. Were the parts that you were choosing in day one, were those already manufactured? Were you manipulating parts in any way? Or like, I like that bar, but I want it bent more. Or like, that stem needs to have a different degree angle. Or
handlebars, definitely. That was a key one. That was a lot of fighting for, to like kind of get the curve just so, because it's...
So were you doing like prototyping and stuff like that too? Like, was that incurred costs? Or
Yeah. There was some basic tooling for that. Tire tread, there was tooling, things like that.
Interesting.
And also just like sometimes it's taking like what exists from like a vendor's catalog and saying like, I want this, but I want that with it, and they'll modify it for you or something like that. And whether they bear the cost or you bear the cost, like
it's worked out.
Yeah, it's worked out. We're also fortunate. There's a lot of like we try and use parts throughout our whole production, so we can kind of like share the minimums. We've established like kind of our sort of signature like brown leather that like we can use year to year, and it, so we're not each change you make is difficult and costly in manufacturing, especially if, like low volumes, because we're still kind of a niche company. We don't we sell to a very specific customer still. So
you have, I guess your first one was the Roadster Classic, I guess?
Yeah, we had the Roadster Classic. We started with like the Roadster, the Dutchie, and the Mixed D.
Okay, so 3 models to start. And what were the differences between those?
Their frame design.
Okay.
Like the Dutchies are sort of like very classic upright, like step-through bike. roadsters, like your also classic diamond frame, with the top tube. The Mixie is this, I guess, the bike that's sort of in between those two. That it's still considered a step through, which traditionally is for women, but it's just more it's a kind of a sportier riding position than the Dutchie, which is very upright.
Right. Cool.
And then like around that, like we started making bags and racks and things like that to kind of add to the utility of the bike, and as well as like to personalize it. Sure. Generally in the world of bikes, especially at that time, there was like everything was just like, it was like nylon and like plastic buckles, and like, we just wanted like, I guess, a more heritage experience, it was like canvas and leather, and so that's.
Well, I like that you went with metal petals and not plastic black ones.
Yeah.
That like even since the 80s, black plastic petals with reflectors on them have existed, but like with the spindle going
Definitely.
through.
Yeah, we try and reduce as much plastic on the bike as possible, just for longevity.
Now, with distribution early days, like you said, you were just rolling the bikes out on the sidewalk, and then you
very beginning, yeah.
And then the trade show happened. Then you got some wholesale accounts.
Yeah.
What is distribution looking like today?
Is
it more of a wholesale business, or is it mostly
it's still mostly
direct?
a wholesale business? Yeah. So bikes, you kind of have to have like a bit of everything. I guess it's what they call omni-channel. Ideally, like a experienced mechanic in a bike shop who's building a bike is the best way to buy a bike, I believe. That we try to like design our program around that to kind of direct sales to our wholesale accounts. Our website does a lot of the marketing, of course, and we do as much as we can to like, build the brand, but then sort of fulfillment at the wholesale experience. They can purchase through our website, but again, still like mostly fulfillment at the wholesale experience. Sure. We sell internationally as well, and that's kind of works through distributors. We sell in right now we're in Singapore, New Zealand, Canada, Europe.
And that's done through a distribution company, or is that sales that you guys have generated?
So Europe, we were doing our own. I think we're going to transition out of that to more of a distributor model. It really like what we learned is Europe's interesting because it's effectively the EU, like the one single economic community, but in reality, especially for like a product like a bicycle, they're all very different markets with different demands and different tastes and even different like safety requirements, so.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So we're going to split it up now and work with individual countries.
Cool. How has COVID affected you guys, or has it? Positive, negative?
Both, both. So like I guess on the negative side, it severely impacted manufacturing. We work on a very sort of seasonal demand. Winter is pretty quiet. Even Christmas, it's like people aren't really thinking bikes. But like around March, April, our website traffic kind of hockey sticks. Yeah. But at that same time, so we want to have bikes landed in our warehouse early spring, and that's kind of when COVID broke out, right? So that was like, it was like Chinese New Year, which is in January. Then COVID broke out, and everyone who left the factories for Chinese New Year stayed away because they didn't want them to come back because of COVID.
Right.
So there was like this really long delay between, I think they take 2 weeks off for New Year's, and then they added a month on for COVID. So it just pushed everything out. So we're still getting through that. We were lucky to get some inventory in, and then then sort of COVID happened, and at first it was like no one knew really what to expect. A lot of our stores kind of didn't want to be open that we sell to. And then demand has just been so high, I mean, it's been kind of crazy that a lot of most accounts that we sell to are open if they can be. We can't seem to hold inventory. Like as soon as we have inventory, it's selling kind of before it's even available to the general public. It sells from our warehouse to our wholesalers.
Wow.
Before we can make it like live on our website kind of thing. It's like the demand I think is kind of crazy and really encouraging. You know, it's such a unique experience that it's hard to plan around. You know, like you as a business, we're trying to ask, you know, like how long can this reliably last? Has there been a fundamental change in how people are as a society that they will ride more and do less of other things? I don't know.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
so those are the questions we're trying to ask ourselves because it's our business works on really long projections. You know, if we want to manufacture a bike, it's probably 5 to 6 months, from when we place that purchase order. So, you're trying to decide what demand is going to be like,
Right. And then you're using I was going to ask you later, but we could talk about it now. Just like the metrics for defining success for you guys, like, is it just based on LY, like you're just trying to beat last year's numbers, or is it let's really try to innovate and, like, how do you guys measure your success each year?
I mean, it's definitely like, sales are clearly a big part of it, of course. Sure. I mean, I think what is also after like 12 years, it's also, how can I build a life around this? What's like a life that I want to live now that we have families as well? So it's a balance. It's a balance of like, of course we want to grow, but we also, like, to what end?
Right. Exactly.
You find a place where it's like, okay, I feel safe as a business. I feel safe financially. Maybe I can create more room to like be with my family and my friends, and I don't have to. If I don't, what is the cost of more growth? If it means like less of that, like that's always a question, like to weigh out. Like, are we going to continue to like grow and add more products and spend more time at the factories and meeting with like distributors? It's just a question. We want to grow, of course, and we're ambitious, but I'm starting to realize more and more, like, what's the true benefit or cost to that?
Yeah.
And it's not, and sometimes like growing or adding new product lines, revenue streams isn't necessarily like the answer. Right.
Did you have goals set early on, like at the beginning?
Yeah. We never it's never been like 5 years exit strategy kind of,
right.
Like
it didn't strike me as that, which is why I asked the question.
We were thinking like build a brand, like, here's a place my kids can work one day, like that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
And, so, and within like the brand and the product, there's small refinements. Electric is interesting because there's like kind of a lot we can do with that. Accessories are interesting. The bikes are constantly getting tweaked, but it's no like kind of like sweeping change. So yeah, I mean, I think there's still creative opportunities. Like I still feel challenged by creatively, which is good. I think when that stops, then it's like,
right, yeah.
Then you kind of on remote control a little bit, but
hopefully the kid's old enough to work here by then.
yeah, exactly.
What you guys have always offered really cool colors.
Yeah.
Both sort of in matte appeal or a matte finish, as well as the gloss, I guess. Do you call it?
Yeah, matte and gloss.
What sort of defines the colorway, or like, do you guys follow like a color story the way a fashion brand does, or where do you guys get that inspiration?
We look at trend. I think in the beginning, which I think became kind of our most popular colors, were like was looking at like a lot of vintage Mercedes and Porsche colors.
Oh, is that where they came from?
Yeah.
I have the Rosewood, I think it's called.
Yeah.
One of the, like, it's like
I think
brown in light, black in certain lights, and then it looks red in certain lights.
Yeah, it
it's
has
like
like kind of
got
a
that
burgundy.
fleck.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting, beautiful color.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
I don't know specifically,
Just
like
selfishly.
if that one. Yeah. I mean, I think those were like, definitely like it was like those catalogs were like, if it wasn't like specifically like a color, like I like that color on that car, I want that green on this bike. It was like just like the overall experience of it. In the beginning, it was all glosses. We've gone to some more metallics now and mattes. But generally it's like, it's just trying to. I think a lot of our colors have like just a bit of grays in it. Like you're kind of making them a little less primary. So they're not like kind of cartoony colors. They're kind of
I like all the muted colors myself. Were you always a Mercedes Porsche guy? Like, were you always a car guy?
Well, I've never owned like a beautiful car like in that sense. In the world of cars, yes, that's where it would be.
The taste, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What? So I was emailing back and forth with your wife, Bree, and she said surfing has obviously been a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
So what is like? How often do you surf these days?
I mean, less 'cause I have a 2-year-old now. But I mean, I'll still surf like a couple times a week.
What's your spot?
Venice.
Okay.
Yeah.
You go to the pier, or you jetties?
Usually at the pier. Yeah. It's close. I can ride my bike. That's kind of like half of it. Just like not fussing too much. I don't know. If I don't do it, then like I'm just like I'm kind of shitty. Like I'm kind of like.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Like I don't know how else to explain it, but like if I'm not doing it, then like sort of like just like mentally, like everything that normally would set me off, like sets me off a lot easier in life, whether it's like family or work or whatever it is, but if I manage to get like myself in the water, part of it's exercise, but part of it's just like just the space.
Yeah, it's an outlet,
and it's a sensation, I guess, of actual surfing. I think I'm a much better person if I do it, so.
What kind of boards are you surfing?
I surf a shortboard.
Thruster.
Yeah. So this actually a South African shaper in the South Bay. His name is Ian Wright.
Okay.
Shapes my boards. Cool. Yeah.
So what took you from Abbot Kinney to this space here on Lincoln? Was it literally just space? Just need a bigger space?
Yeah, it was. We definitely needed space. That was a tiny location. I think that was like, there was like an upstairs and a downstairs, and I think it was like 400 square feet. Right. So we had 200 square feet for our office and 200 square feet for like showroom to below. So it had a courtyard, so we managed to get some more use of the space. So it was that. Abbot Kinney changed dramatically in the time that we started our company. It's become like more of like a traditional commercial street, like many streets, like they all start to kind of look somewhat similar, where it's like the same retailers, the same kind of formula for a street.
Right.
I don't know I'm sure you have that experience in
for
San Diego
retail,
too. Yeah, it's like you see like the same brands just lined up. If one of them starts there,
it becomes a mall.
Then they all like follow each other, and then so it's kind of become a bit of a mall experience. So there's that. Like it just like it doesn't feel like it's part of like the community street that it once was, because it used to be really like, I mean, people will come to visit Abbot Kinney, but it was also like the street for Venice. Like that was like,
you go get your bagel, and then,
you saw everyone you knew on that street, and so it was like, it was a real community. It's less of that now. I mean, there's still, it's still one of the primary streets, of course, but it's more of a tourist destination today. So we never sold bikes to tourists. Like tourists don't. Right.
You're not buying a bike on vacation.
You're not a tourist and buy a bike. Yeah, exactly. So that's never really been our market. We ended up on Lincoln, and Lincoln, a lot of like, I think of what maybe was on like recently, like on Abbot Kinney has come to Lincoln. It's like one of the streets that's been changing over time, you know.
What I know you've worked on a couple different partnerships over the years. Didn't you do a partnership with like Almond down in?
That was one of our first, in Newport.
What are some of the partnerships that you're doing these days, or are there any?
We have. So we have like some like hotels that we work. We're doing something with the Beverly Hills Hotel actually, and like there's some bigger partners like that. Like so like with Beverly Hills, like we're doing like their kind of iconic like banana leaf like wall print cool. Like over a bike. It's really beautiful. We're actually doing something with Claire V, who's like a handbag designer in Los Angeles, and she does really, really beautiful stuff. She has like a bunch of stores as well. So we're making a bike with her for this summer. Who else have we? Oh, we work with Jenny Kane. She's also like another kind of like big LA retailer. That's kind of we tend to do like a lot with like women's brands, you know. I think like that's kind of one of the things in our position in the bike world. So if you look like traditional bike companies, they sell, you know, roughly like 20% of their businesses to women. We're like 55% to women. So
no way.
Yeah. So that's always like kind of been a big
necessary
Highway 1. Yeah. It's a big part of who we are. So like, there's a lot of our kind of relationships are kind of through like women's brands.
That's cool. That's awesome. So electric bikes is next. Anything else? What else is next for Linus?
We have some other like little things going on. So we have electric bikes, which we're really excited about. It's taken a long time to like kind of get to this point. It's we just didn't want to like leap into it, you know. Like there's like there's like just kind of changing technologies. We wanted to like when we launched our electric bike, we just wanted to be right. So we've definitely like taken our time to develop it, and go through a lot of prototypes and find the right like manufacturer who thinks up to it. And so
are you still using the same manufacturer?
No, we went somewhere else for that.
Okay, so where are the bikes made now?
China.
Oh, in China. Okay.
Sorry, for the electric. Yeah. Taiwan for our conventional bikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they're a great factory who does a lot of like great work in that space.
I think a lot of people don't realize that like most of the carbon bike frames are built in the same factory.
Yeah.
And I think Giant might own them. I'm not sure. But like if you're buying a carbon frame bike, I mean, unless you're getting like an Italian bike, that frame, whether it be Trek, Cannondale, whoever.
China.
Don't quote me on these brands specifically, but chances are very good that the same factory is producing your frame.
Yeah, China's really good at carbon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like it's like Foxconn in that sense. You know, it's like they're making phones for everyone. You know, they're good at manufacturing.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that bike's coming out, as I said, kind of end of summer.
Cool.
Which is disappointing for us because because of COVID, we were expecting it to launch in June, in fact, but it's just pushed back. Other than that, we have some kind of interesting kid stuff. We're kind of a line of helmets coming out for kids. One of the things like. I mean, part of it's like, I guess, being a parent as well. But
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, like in the kids' world, like a lot of like the helmets are like really cartoony, like, and so I don't know, just felt like, okay, we could
make it better.
Yeah, we could just something that's like just not like covered like in daisies for girls and I don't know, rocket ships for boys. You know, it's like I don't know. We just feel like there's kind of more that we could do with like kind of graphics and colors that's not being done. That's I think a little cooler. So that's that'll be coming out also kind of towards the end of summer and then there's always like stuff to like, you know, what's kind of nice about a bike or at least our bikes is like it's like there's the bike itself, of course it's core, but then like what can be added to it. Like so We're always making bags and racks and kind of details that add to the utility and personality of the bike.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. What are you listening to these days? You still into NWA or what?
No, I'm not. I've moved on from NWA. We listen to so much music, but it's kind of like you know what? Honestly, like I feel like Spotify does such a good job of supplying me like new music.
100%.
I've become kind of lazy about my exploration, but I feel like I haven't like suffered for it because like every like week, like a Discover Weekly comes out, and there's not like it's not like vastly new every week, but I'm just amazed at like how many new songs from bands that I've never heard of, old or new, that it'll feed me that are like so exactly my taste in music.
Right.
Like what they're doing it really well. Yeah. So it's just supplied my music needs pretty much entirely. Sometimes I'll listen to like BBC Radio 6 has like really interesting music, or Radio Nova, the French radio station. But yeah, Spotify's amazing.
Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Cool, thank you.
I'd like to thank Adam one more time for hosting me in the Linus showroom. It was great to sit down and chat, finally meet each other face to face, and of course at a safe social distance. The microphone cables are much more than 6 feet long, so all went well that day. Really appreciate you taking the time. As always, thanks to Clear Audio for the noise-canceling headphones, as well as to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Stay tuned in another couple weeks' time when I'll be back with yet another episode of the Standard Age Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Bye, everyone.